What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast. This is our pre-draft 2023 edition. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, joined by one of the top fantasy rankers in the game, Sean Kerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? Long time no talk football. How you been doing, man?
I've been good, man. Enjoying the offseason, starting to get into some NBA, some NHL, but always happy to come back to the bread and butter and talk some NFL.
Absolutely. Did you get your Fantasy Pros trophy?
I did. I got to snap a pic and upload it, but yeah, I got it not too long ago actually.
Same. That thing's massive.
I know, like I'm thinking about maybe displaying them from time to time behind me. I know you got yours up behind you, but they're so massive that
Yeah,
I don't think they can be a constant fixture behind me. But
right.
we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. All right, yeah, but we are going to kind of run through all the fantasy relevant moves of the offseason and kind of get you guys caught up heading into the draft, and then we'll do another episode breaking down all of the team's rosters and fantasy implications post draft as well. So let's jump right into it. We'll go position by position, and I think with quarterback, the main guy to discuss here, I don't even know if you could count it as a move, but because it's not. But Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of in limbo right now. We know he probably won't be back with the Packers. We think he's going to the Jets. I guess my question would be, assuming he does move on here, is he still in that fantasy starter discussion for you?
I think he's still just, a high-end QB2. Going to a new team could take a veteran like Rodgers some time to get up to speed with the offense and new receivers. Like, he's the type of guy that takes time developing chemistry with those wide receivers, and he needs to gain their trust. So that's a big reason why they brought in Alan Lazard.
All right, let's go over some other quarterback moves quickly, and then we'll jump into the media discussion, running backs, wide receivers. But Derek Carr is going to the Saints from the Raiders, and then Jimmy Garoppolo goes from the Niners to the Raiders. So thoughts on this? I don't think we're drafting either of these guys as a QB1, so not much to talk about relative to them, but any just thoughts on the impact?
No, Carr, he's still, mid-range QB2. I think, going to the Saints is a drop-off. He had Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller on the Raiders. He does have some weapons on the Saints. Chris Olave's, he's going to be potential top 15, top 10 receiver going forward. Michael Thomas, if he stays healthy, will be massive. I think, Derek Carr going to the Saints will help a guy like Rashid Shaheed. I think he could break out. Just having a quarterback that's capable of pushing the ball downfield. Andy Dalton ended up being their main quarterback last year. So it'll be an upgrade for the pass catchers for the Saints. But for Carr, this is a slight downgrade. So he's more of a mid-range QB2 for me.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't really see much of a difference at all between Andy Dalton and Derek Carr. I know most teams you'd probably take Carr at this stage of his career, but in terms like Dalton played really well last year.
Surprisingly well.
Right. So I just don't think Carr's coming over here and changing that up. And the fact that we saw him, kind of struggle going to a new, in a new offense last year, I do think that another guy expectations should be tempered. And what about Jimmy G going to the Raiders?
Yeah, that's, he's interesting because he might be a little bit overrated just because he's operated in such a friendly scheme under Kyle Shanahan. I mean, this is a scheme that made Nick Mullins look like an NFL starting caliber quarterback, makes Brock Purdy look like a future Hall of Famer. So there's a chance, Jimmy G could really flop here, but he does have some nice weapons. And Devontae Adams, he has Jacoby Myers now, Hunter Renfrow. So he does have weapons around him, but hard to see him as anything more than just a lower end QB2. They lost Darren Waller. Now they have Austin Hooper at tight end. So he's going from having like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle to having a guy like Hooper at tight end. So I see him just as a low end QB2.
Yeah, I think there's an outside chance he could maybe increase his volume numbers. Remember we saw Derek Carr at times start throwing for 400 yards and stuff like that. I think we could see Jimmy do that only because he's never been in a position really throughout his career where he's been in a lot of negative game scripts. With the 49ers, you kind of mentioned it. For the most part, they've been good when he's played and they've had a defense. And this Raider team, I think once again, they're going to have a bottom 5 defense. I don't really like the moves they made in the offseason. Don't think they got better on defense. And this was a bad defense last year. So that's about the only thing I could see for him. But, the big injury risk and no rushing upside. So in the fantasy discussion, it's kind of a moot point. You're just kind of drafting him to fill your roster if you're in a 2 QB.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think going from Carr to Jimmy G, do you think that impacts Adams in any way, or is it just like a lateral move?
Probably a lateral move. I mean, Jimmy G's probably a little more accurate on certain balls, but then it's also, he hasn't been thrown outside as much, but Carr and Devonta, at times they didn't have the connection, and at times they would do nothing but force feed him. So I'm assuming McDaniels reuniting with Jimmy G will know how to get the best out of him, but that remains to be seen. But I mean, I usually just bet on talent with guys like Adams. Like I'm not going to say we need to downgrade him massively or anything like that. All right, let's go to running backs, and let's start with Ezekiel Elliott here. Obviously, longtime Cowboys starting running back gets the axe in the offseason. So what does this mean for Zeke is still unsigned, but what does this mean for this Cowboy backfield now? Do you think Tony Pollard essentially, I know he had the injury in the playoffs, but could be setting up as a guy to see a pretty substantial increase?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we finally have Zeke out of the way. So Pollard is, top 5 potential running back. And he can certainly handle a workhorse, workload. So I think he's a top 10 back. However, he's going to have to survive the draft because the Cowboys right now are the second most likely team to draft Bijan Robinson. And that would obviously be a massive, massive blow to Tony Pollard. So again, he's one of the players, at running back that are going to have to survive this draft, hoping that his team doesn't land Bijan Robinson. So right now, I think his ADP and best ball is running back 15. So I think that's fair in factoring some of the risk, but either way, he should be a top 5, top 10 back next year without Zeke.
Yeah, and I mean, I think his ADP, if it's around 15, it's kind of splitting the difference, right? Because if he's the workhorse, like you said, top 5 guy, if he's not, he's still in that top 25-ish, borderline top 30 discussion, as he's kind of been these last few years with Zeke healthy. So I think that's what you're getting with him. And then another guy who status is kind of up in the air now is Dalvin Cook. Reportedly may not be back with the Minnesota Vikings in 2023. They did re-sign Alexander Mattison to what could be a very nice deal for them if they move on from Cook. So what is your sense of how this is all going to play out?
Yeah, so Mattison signed that 2 years, $7 million contract, and he's fully capable of being their lead back. I don't think they have any doubts about that. And Cook, he has a $14 million cap hit this year. Yeah. So there's still a chance they could trade him. He had that surgery on his torn labrum in his shoulder. So that's probably why we haven't seen a trade yet. So it's not out of the question. I think once he's healthy enough to pass a physical for another team to trade for him, I think that's when it'll happen. So the fact that he hasn't been traded yet probably doesn't mean much. I think they're waiting for him to get healthy, but I do think that he could very easily be traded. So I think Madison is probably sneaky to add right now because without Cook, Madison's going to be a top 20 back most likely. So I'm trying to buy in on Madison right now.
And Dalvin Cook obviously would be a massive acquisition for whoever lands him. So is any sense of where he's going to go? Because that obviously would impact then that team's backfield as well.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I have no clue. We have some pretty good backs in this draft. So I think if a team doesn't end up getting one of these top backs and they're running back needy, we're going to have injuries pop up. So I think this is something that could happen later, after training camp. Who knows? But I think this is a situation where, wherever Dalvin ends up, he's obviously going to be the workhorse back. So we could have some running back musical chairs with him, players in the draft. So I don't know which team necessarily would want him because I don't know how much of this cap hit, how much they're going to have to absorb of that. But it'll be interesting to see if and where he ends up, on the trading block.
Yeah, I wonder. I almost get the sense it would probably be more of a contender, a team that feels like they're player weight, kind of like the Niners with Christian McCaffrey, where the running backs in general are, the value's down, but I think if you feel good about your team, maybe a Buffalo, Kansas City, a team like that, so it could be a pretty massive move. So that's always something to keep in mind too when you're kind of looking at these ADPs and drafting these guys. Like you said, there could be musical chairs yet to come in some of these backfields. All right, Devin Singletary goes from Buffalo to Houston. How does this impact? Let's talk our guy, because we'll talk the Bills backfield in a bit. So let's talk our guy Dameon Pierce. How do you think Singletary's acquisition impacts Pierce, if at all?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big blow to Pierce, just because, Pierce's main appeal last season was just volume. He had like no competition for touches. So that was his appeal. Singletary will at least command a handful of touches a game. So in an offense like the Texans, that's pretty massive. Pierce is still a bet on talent, low end RB2, but I would not be shocked if this, turns into a running back by committee. Singletary's, he's not an elite back, but he's, a veteran, probably, like a Jamal Williams, where he commands some leader touches. Teammates love him. They call him motor for a reason. So I think that he could eat into Pierce's role enough to matter. But I still love Pierce. I think he's really talented. And he's still probably a low end RB2, but that was not good to see for Pierce's stock this season.
Yeah, I don't know if it actually impacts him as much as it looks like on paper, only because remember Pierce, he started the year, he was splitting the carries with was it Burkhead, I believe.
Yeah.
And then that started to drain. So maybe it's just that he ended up averaging about 17 carries a game. I think they're still fine with him around there. It's just when they look at I think they wanted a veteran. They seem to always want a veteran. I know it's a new coaching staff, but behind him, and it's going to be a second year back. So I think that's more what it's about. Like Singletary is a guy who, there are times in Buffalo where we thought he might fall out of the rotation as well, but Buffalo kind of whiffed on some of its running back draft picks, at least, to this point. So new coaching staff, D'Amico Ryans is coming from San Francisco, where they kind of rotated their backs. So it could be a concern. I think we do have to monitor it, but Singletary is also a guy you could see like getting 0 carries in a game. Like in Houston, like he could kind of deteriorate to that point too. So I'm not going to sit here and say like Singletary is definitely going to be a blow. It's just something we have to monitor, but I would think that, they're going to see the talent in Pierce, and he's going to,
I think he'll just command more touches than a Rex Burkhead. But Pierce's ADP is like RB19 right there, which seems fair.
Right. It's, you do question the receiving upside, which is why I think you can't go into, mid-range to low end RB1 status with, or mid-range RB2 to low, high end RB2 with him yet, because he only caught 2.3 balls last year for just under 13 yards a game. And Singletary is a guy who you could bring him in and he could play mostly on pass downs. He could pass block. So Singletary may not put up a lot of numbers, but he could still kind of cut into Pierce's receiving upside. So that may be the biggest concern, actually. With this acquisition. David Montgomery, he goes from the Chicago Bears, where he was kind of looked like on the verge of potentially getting usurped by Khalil Herbert. Now he's in Detroit, where it's probably going to be a similar situation. DeAndre Swift is still there. I think my big question to you is, David Montgomery is going to take over this Jamal Williams role. Williams goes to the Saints. Do you think he has a similar kind of touchdown upside? Do you think he gets more or less carries? Do you think this is a year Swift finally gets featured? Like, how do you think this kind of, because Montgomery's a pretty big acquisition for a backfield that was already kind of split and work between 3-4 guys at times.
Yeah, I mean, he probably won't score 17 touchdowns, but he does have more touchdown upside in this offense. I mean, the Lions offense is really good. You called it, we kind of both called it last year, just how underrated this offense was heading into the season. So, he'll likely be the goal line back and have the potential to score double-digit touchdowns. Much better offensive line to run behind. I can see him taking over the Jamal Williams role. Plus, he's a good pass catching back. So he could be more of a workhorse than Jamal Williams was. Now, the wild card, of course, is DeAndre Swift. And I mean, the coaching staff really soured on him last year. So he's really the wild card. I mean, he could become a 50-50 split with Monty and handle most of the passing down work, or just be completely phased out, sort of like he was last year. So that's kind of baked into Montgomery's wide range of outcomes. But Monty has high-end RB2 upside in this offense, or he'll be, our running back by committee RB3. But I do like buying into Monty this season because, like you said, he was kind of getting phased out last year. But I think that had more to do with Khalil Herbert just being really good. We can get to that later than Monty really like slowing down or anything. So I think he does get an upgrade going to this, very good Lions offense.
Yeah, and it looks like his ADP is pretty sharp right now. It's already up to RB21.
Yeah.
So it's there's not a ton there, but I do see, the upside is him kind of commanding essentially the same role he had in Chicago with Swift continuing to be more that, like 7 to 10 touch guy. But there's also downside of, Swift kind of turning it around in the offseason, and Montgomery could just be a guy who, just gets a few like those early down carries and not much else. So another situation to monitor. I don't know if I feel even totally comfortable taking him at RB21 if you're in kind of a league where you just have to you need floors. But if you're in a best ball league, the ceiling for Montgomery is very high in this offense. Miles Sanders goes from the Eagles to the Carolina Panthers. D'Onta Foreman ended up a really good season last year, but now this coaching staff is different. You got Frank Reich coming in here. So, I mean, I think this Panther team's another team that people are getting a little bit too excited about in the offseason. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think Miles Sanders' value is here in food? Can he in Carolina, can he kind of replicate a D'Onta Foreman season, or do you think this could be kind of troubling for him?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag because the landing spot is good in the sense that he should still be the workhorse back ahead of Chuba Hubbard. He doesn't really have that much competition, but it's a huge downgrade in terms of offensive line. He was playing behind one of the best O lines in the league, and now he plays on the Panthers. That's going to be a big hit to his yards per carry. But like you alluded to, he doesn't offer much receiving upside. So playing on a team like the Panthers that will likely be trailing more often than not, that's not good. So yeah, I view him as more of a low end RB2 kind of flex option, but his upside's definitely more limited in this offense.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I kind of think back to is okay, they go out and get this guy. Frank Reich comes in. Frank Reich was kind of the architect behind that massive Jonathan Taylor season, right? But does he view Sanders like that? That's the question. So I do think there's some upside here. RB23 again is his ADP, so I don't love it there, just because of the lack of passing game upside. But I do think he's another guy, at least at this juncture, where we're not completely clear on how these depth charts and roles are going to break down. I think the upside is there because if Frank Reich decides, hey, we got to hide, we got to kind of play this kind of conservative ball and give our top running back 18 to 22 carries a game, maybe Miles Sanders is, I mean, he should be that guy. As you mentioned, Chuba is more of the passing down back, but at the same time, number one, Philadelphia, who's very run heavy, looked at Sanders as a expendable, and he's never really caught the ball. So, there's significant downside here as well. Okay, let's talk about this Bucs backfield. You got Leonard Fournette being released, and then Chase Edmonds is brought in. Edmonds has kind of seems like he's fallen out of favor in quite a few spots as of late. So do you think the big move obviously is Fournette being given the axe? Do you think Rachaad White now in year 2 is going to be the workhorse that I think a lot of people in the fantasy community kind of wanted, or at least hoped for last year at various points?
Yeah, so I think this could be more of a battle heading into the season than I would like, but I would give the edge certainly to White. He was their 3rd round pick last year. He's entering his prime, whereas Edmonds is, I would say he's at the tail end of his prime, but both backs have similar skill sets. Both are pretty good pass catching backs. So right now White's ADP is like RB26 and Edmonds is RB 69, which seems a bit too wide right now. So Edmonds is probably the better value there, but I would not be shocked if White ends up being more of the workhorse back. We were both pretty high on him coming out of the draft last year. I think he has a ton of upside, but just this offense with going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield is going to be a big drop off. So I don't know if there's much touchdown upside there. And this could be more of a running back by committee than I would like. But I think White will be the guy heading in the season.
Yeah, and this could be a run heavy offense with Baker Mayfield at the helm. I think the issue is I don't recall Mayfield being a guy that's thrown to his back that often, regardless of who it is. I remember who was our guy on the Rams last year that never was a Kyron Williams.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Kyron Williams. Yeah,
Kyron Williams. Yeah.
So, I don't know if the pass catching even comes in. Now, this could be the worst iteration of this Bucs team since pre-Tom Brady. I think their win total is only 6.5 in the cellar of the NFC South. So, from that perspective, maybe they get some more opportunities. But I have to look at it and say, I don't think it would have been that hard to just retain Fournette if they wanted to. I know he was kind of a Tom Brady guy, I guess. So I'm thinking they're going to give it to White. And the fact that White is still going, after guys like Miles Sanders and Montgomery, I think there's similar question marks with all these guys for different reasons. So I don't actually mind taking Rashad White. He's going outside the top 24 running backs right now, just outside. So I think Edmonds is just, he's a guy, yes, he could cut in, but at the same time, he could also get cut. He's not ingratiated to this coaching staff in any type of way. He's just been bouncing around the league for the last couple of years. Damian Harris goes from the Patriots to the Bills. So, the question here would be, does he just slide right into the Singletary role, even though he's hasn't really shown as much as in the receiving game, or is this a good sign for James Cook, or do we think Minnesota still has another move? I mean, Buffalo still has another move to make, perhaps, trading for a guy like a Dalvin.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. But Damian Harris might fill in the role that Buffalo envisioned for Zach Moss, but didn't pan out. I mean, he's a bigger back. I think eventually they're going to want Josh Allen to not run the ball so much in short yardage situations. So having a bigger back like Harris, could, help in that regard. And I don't think we ever thought James Cook was going to be a true workhorse back. So this could be a blessing in disguise for Cook, because I think he's still going to be, have RB3 value, even if Harris does take the full Singletary role. I still think Cook's going to dominate the passing down work, mix in on early downs. I mean, this is a really good offense. So I still think Cook is very sneaky. It was, I know we were mentioning this towards the end of last season, just how little they use Nyheim Hines after that trade, because he's another good pass catching back. He's still very good. So he might be used a lot more this season. That might worry me more, really eat into James Cook passing down work. But I think either way, I think Cook is, an RB3 with plenty of upside, especially in PPR formats where, Harris, there's only so much early down work that he can get on this pass heavy offense. So I still think Cook is pretty sneaky.
I mean, Cook is another guy. I mean, I'm looking at the fantasy points ADP. There's obviously, there's not much to go off of ADP wise this time of year, but James Cook is already RB 28. So to me, that's actually too high. I think
anything past 30.
I mean, this Buffalo backfield, like I said, I just worry that they might not be done making moves. So, Harris is RB 32. I think they could be both of them could be overvalued at those ADPs, just because we know Buffalo, yes, they probably want Josh Allen to run less, but they also drop back to pass like 70% of the time.
Exactly.
So the consistency there is just really hard to come by. And then now you're also talking about, with the Nyheim Hines potentially as a third guy, you're talking about a limited ceiling too. So at this point, the Buffalo backfield, not really a one I'm investing in. And, David Harris, despite how well, and I thought he ran really well at times in New England, but they still considered him expendable. And we've seen what happens when New England kind of lets go of it back. They kind of bounce around and really never reach that consistency level. Think about a Sony Michel. He had a few good games for the Rams, I think, but It's been tough. So yeah, this is kind of a red flag
Yeah.
backfield for me at this point. Jamal Williams, our guy, goes to the Saints. So it should be a fun team. Jamal Williams is one of my favorite running backs. If you haven't seen like some of his interviews, go
He's the
check him
best.
out. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, the touchdown upside, man. It was an outlier season last year
Yeah.
with the 17 touchdowns. But what do you think happens now? We've always seen this role behind Alvin Kamara be relevant at some point for the Saints team, and now he's dealing with the legal issue
Yep.
as well. So what are your thoughts on Williams here?
Yeah, so again, I wouldn't expect 17 touchdowns again this year, but as always, don't overlook them. And obviously, when Kamara's healthy, it's hard to see him commanding too many touches. He could, be their main goal line back, but again, probably not going to score 17 touchdowns again. But like you said, Kamara, he's still facing legal issues and a potential suspension, so that gives Jamal a clear path to RB2 upside to begin the season. Without needing an injury. So he's one of those backup running backs that carries a ton of upside anyway, and he has a clear path to hitting that potentially for the first 6 games. So his ADP is like RB like 35 range, which is about fair. But if you want to take advantage of a potential suspension, that he would be the type of player to invest early. So I think the RB3 range certainly makes sense for him right now.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, especially with all the uncertainty, I'd rather draft a guy like him again, who's going after guys like Harris and Cook and
Yeah.
Sanders and Montgomery, because you may get a good 6 games of him being the lead back. We've always seen this Saints team kind of be one that, that second running back will come into play, and you never know. Kamara's getting older anyway. He could potentially miss more games. So I think there's a lot of upside. I'm sure Williams will be pretty high in your, backup running back rankings.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he's a guy I don't mind investing in at all. Rashad Penny is now with the Philadelphia Eagles. So does he just slide right into that Miles Sanders role? I think Penny's a guy who we've seen him run really well, and he's a little bit bigger than in the Sanders. So I think this could be. I mean, this is kind of intriguing here. I know the pass catch is really not going to be there, but what do you think of Penny?
Yeah, this is an exciting move. He's one of the best pure runners when healthy, obviously. Since 2021, he's first in yards per attempt, first in yards over expected per rush, the next gen stat I love. Now he's playing behind one of the best offensive lines in football. Defenses will have to try to slow down Jalen Hurts. So Penny could break a handful of just huge runs this season. He's not going to offer much in the passing game. But as always, he's a huge injury risk. So you'll know when to play him. It's when he's healthy. But I don't know if he can get through a full 17-game season. But, that kind of comes with the territory. So he's a high upside RB3 who I think will be really good to have, to start the season. But as always, you can't bank on him to stay healthy, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he's a good fit for that Sanders role, and he's going around RB 38 ish. So another guy I don't mind investing in because he could just go right into that Sanders role. Not going to give you a ton of pass catching, so that's why. But that, for the price, and for, he's another guy with that high yard per attempt average, good O line, like you said. So yeah, it's another guy I don't mind investing in here, and we'll wrap it up running backs with Deontay Foreman. He goes to Chicago, had a really good year in Carolina last year. So now does he just slide into the Khalil Herbert role? Is that what we're thinking here?
And Herbert slides into the Monty role?
Yeah. I mean, I'm asking you, what do you think?
I would say that makes sense. I think Herbert is the man. He's shown whenever Montgomery was out, he was putting up RB1 numbers. I love Khalil Herbert. He led the league in yards expected per rush, or yards over expected per rush attempt, according to Next Gen Stats. I think he's really good. They brought in Foreman because, they need someone in the backfield with them. They're a very run-heavy team, so I think both backs can be fantasy relevant when they're both healthy. But I think Herbert could push RB2, 3, flex value, even with Foreman active. And then if Foreman misses time, Herbert has low-end RB2 potential. So Foreman signing on the surface doesn't look good for Herbert, but I still think Herbert's going to be the lead back in this offense this season.
Yeah, and Herbert going in the mid 30s, Foreman in the mid to low 40s, and in terms of ADP at running back, I don't mind investing into Herbert either. I think he will probably be the lead guy. And Foreman, let's be honest, he had that big breakout with Carolina last year. But again, there was a certain coaching staff there, there's a certain kind of team build.
Yeah.
And now you're switching it up. And Foreman has also been a guy that's he's been a second, third, even a guy that's been a healthy scratch at times in his career. So we don't know exactly how he's going to pan out, but I do think Herbert's on the upswing. And this team also this year, I mean, they may not be as run heavy because they have started to make some moves, get better in terms of pass protection and at the wide receiver position with DJ Moore, who we'll talk about in a second. So yeah, I think Montgomery, Herbert is the guy with Montgomery out of the picture.
Yeah, and he's RB 35-ish right now in AB. I love the value you're getting on him there.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the guys we mentioned toward the end, Williams, Penny, Khalil Herbert, those are the guys to invest in over, guys going a lot earlier. Like Montgomery and Miles Sanders and guys like that.
Hey, the frozen pond tier.
Exactly. Oh man, it's gonna be epic this year because we're gonna none of these guys can catch the damn football. All right, let's go to wide receiver, and we will talk about DJ Moore, who I just mentioned, in a minute. But I want to start off with DeAndre Hopkins because it looks like now he may be on the move from Arizona. It looks like they may be prepared to just kind of punt the season with Kyler Murray, potentially missing a good chunk of it. So, how does this? First of all, let's say he moves on. How does that impact the Arizona guys like Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, and then any thoughts on where he may land?
Yeah, so like according to Von Miller, he said Hopkins wants to betray the Bills. I mean, imagine if that happens. But I want to say Marquise Brown could be a solid wide receiver 2. Rondale Moore would be a wide receiver 3-4 type possibly, but the QB situation is a total mess. We have no idea who's going to be the quarterback for the first 6-8 games, right? Because Kyler's probably going to miss some time. Colt McCoy's hurt, so I don't know if they bring in like a Teddy Bridgewater type to start this season, or like you said, just punt it. So that's kind of holding me up on like how to rank these guys. But they're going away from Cliff Kingsbury to this new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, who's coming over from Cleveland. So we could see more 2 tight end sets. So guys like Ertz and McBride could see a boost. If Hopkins gets traded away, it wouldn't necessarily be the receivers. But right now, this whole Cardinals team is an absolute mess. So I'm just kind of waiting to see how it all plays out. But it does seem like, just given the situation, Hopkins could be on the move just because their season seems like it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, and honestly, if it was just going to Colt McCoy for 6 to 8 games, I would be more comfortable in terms of how to project these guys because we've seen
exactly
Colt McCoy, and he's been solid. He's just going to get rid of the ball fast, and that's actually good for the receiving volume of those guys. But if we get somebody else, we could see a move to a very, very run heavy type of team that just tries to keep the game, shorten the game as much as possible. And that, even for a guy like Marquise Brown, who ended up catching 5.6 balls per game last year, that volume may not be there. So this is a situation that as of now I'm kind of treading lightly with, but it doesn't look like, at least as of now, you want to invest much into the Arizona Cardinals in fantasy. Now, if we get more clarity, I think then maybe Brown, Moore, both of those guys could see a ton of volume in the right offense, but we could just see a kind of dip in the passing volume across the board with this Cardinal team, especially if they trade Hopkins. Then it's like, all right, we don't even have Hopkins. Why are we dropping back 40 times a game? DJ Moore, as I mentioned, goes in the trade from the Panthers to the Chicago Bears. Can he put up, can he kind of push for wide receiver 1 value here with Justin Fields, or do you think this offense still going to be too run heavy?
Yeah, probably not wide receiver 1. I just don't think he has a touchdown upside. I think it is a slight upgrade for Moore. I mean, the Panthers QB situation has been a dumpster fire for a while now. So the change in scenery could help. He's going to be the clear number 1 target in this offense, but I think they'll still be, pretty run heavy. And every time Justin Fields scrambles, that's going to take away a potential DJ Moore target. And Moore's weakness is always the lack of touchdowns. Last season, he finally scored 7 touchdowns. I think that's probably his ceiling still at this point. So I still view him as, probably a lower end wide receiver too. This is more of just great news for Justin Fields. This is reminding me of just when the Eagles started to really build around Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, Justin Fields is really becoming a top 5 quarterback for me. And this is the type of move that can really get him there. So this just makes me super excited for Justin Fields heading into this season.
Yeah, DJ Moore already going at wide receiver 20. That's one where I don't love it there. I think I want to see more of how everyone kind of plays out around him and get more of a concrete ranking on him. But wide receiver 20 with a guy who, like you said, I don't know if he has that wide receiver 1 upside at least this year. Especially, and he's still gonna have Darnell Mooney there probably, and like if this team's not super pass heavy, the consistency for him at a wide receiver 20, I think you want more consistency week to week. So like the move for Justin, I think that's the way to kind of invest as of now. Brandon Cooks goes from the Texans to the Dallas Cowboys. Does he just kind of slide into that Amari Cooper role of years past? Here is the number 2 guy. I'm assuming Gallup was kind of a hit or miss. I know he'll be a little more removed now, but I'm assuming Cooks is going to be that number 2 guy behind Lamb, especially with Dalton Schultz also gone. So what is your outlook for him?
Yeah, I think he's obviously going to try to fill the Amari Cooper role. I mean, Jalen Tolbert and James Washington just didn't pan out last year, so they didn't really get a Amari Cooper replacement. So like you mentioned, they did lose Dalton Schultz, which should open up a ton of targets. They don't really have anybody there. However, they do seem pretty likely to draft Michael Mayer with their first pick. So that would be the Dalton Schultz replacement there. And Mike McCarthy has also mentioned running the ball more.
Yep.
So I don't think Brandon Cooks is going to put up Amari Cooper numbers. And I think this is probably a drop off from being the number 1, the clear number 1 target on the Texans, like he was a couple years ago, I would say, to now being the number 2 target. And the Cowboys is maybe a slight drop off. So I view Cooks as more of a, I don't know, like a high end wide receiver 3. As opposed to like a wide receiver 2, like an Amari Cooper would be.
Yeah. I mean, well, then you're going to want to draft Brandon Cooks because right now he's going wide receiver 41.
What?
And
no
ADP.
Way.
Yeah, man. So, I think listen, he did have some inconsistencies with Houston. He is now 30. So there are some red flags, but again, I think that's why you take advantage of that. And even as the number 2 target in a little bit of a run heavy rough, I mean, you still got Dak Prescott. Your number 1 back looks like Tony Pollard as of now. They're going to throw the football. Like they're not going to just come out and run more, like significantly more, regardless of what McCarthy says. Like we always hear in the offseason, these guys are like estimating what they're going to do play calling wise, and their numbers are always so off. So I like the upside for Brandon, especially at the price. I think he could.
Yeah, outside of the top 40.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. Yeah.
Like after you got like the number 1 starters on most teams, if you're looking at number 2 receivers, I think the Cowboys are still one of those teams you want to look at.
Yeah, talk about red flags though. I mean, he has been traded 6 times now in the past 5 years. That's probably not a good sign. Like he might not be good in the locker room or something, but he's still talented. How old is he now?
This will be his age 30 season.
Okay, so he's turning 30. Okay, yeah. So I still think he has some juice. So he does have upside, and geez, if you can get him outside of the top 40 right now, that's some great value.
Yeah, and I don't think you acquire him if you're not trying to give him targets, because that's probably the locker room issue. Yeah, like when he hasn't gotten targets, aside from being on a bad team like the Texans, Dallas they're a good team and they have targets. So Cooks, I think good situation for him.
Yeah, he was only causing a scene last year because he didn't want to waste away on the Texans. I can't blame him for that.
Speaking of wasting away, Juju Smith-Schuster, nice. I mean, the promise from where he was, those first couple of seasons in Pittsburgh, to what he's kind of turned into, especially at still a pretty young age, is kind of, I'll say concerning to say the least. So now he goes from Kansas City to New England. Can he even put up Jacoby Myers numbers, I guess, is my question. Like at this point.
No, he's obviously a drop off from Myers at this point in his career. And it's hard to believe he's only 26 years old. It seems like 10 years ago, me and Friedman were debating whether to rank he or Antonio Brown hire on the Steelers. That just seems such a long time ago. And last year, I think towards the end, like the playoffs, you were saying he looks washed, right? I mean,
Yeah, he just didn't look right at all.
if you can't, be a home run in the Chiefs offense as the number 2 target behind Travis Kelce, obviously, like how are you going to succeed in this Patriots offense? So I'm not buying him. I think they do expect him to try to fill the Myers role, but I just don't see him doing it. So yeah, he's just more of a wide receiver 4 with limited upside. So I'm just not interested in him at all in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's wide receiver 46, so it's not. I guess he's not the worst flyer, but
Yeah.
there's so many red flags. I mean, he scored 3 touchdowns over the last 2 years on 129 targets in his age 25 and 26 seasons, which is just you expecting the guy to start peaking around then, and he really hasn't done anything in terms of yards per catch lately. I mean, it's hard to see him in this New England offense now, kind of rebounding. The one thing he'd have working for him potentially is volume, but I didn't see him getting open the way he used to. Because again, you mentioned it. Yeah, he's playing second fiddle to Kelce. He should be open quite a bit, but he wasn't beating a lot of coverage down the stretch last year. So 4.9 catches per game for 58 yards last year. I don't even know if he hits that with New England this year. So yeah, not an exciting buy.
No, and they brought in Mike Gesicki.
Yep.
He could eat, but the Patriots. Not that we could ever predict what they're going to do in the draft, but right now they're more likely to draft a wide receiver their first pick. So they're potentially in the market for Jackson Smith, Najigba, Zay Flowers. If they draft either one of those guys, that's going to be even more crippling for Juju's stock.
Or to the Patriots, because they seem to never be able to draft wide receivers.
Yeah, well, this would be an instance where they draft somebody that's good. Like, I don't know if anybody actually liked N'Keal Harry or some of the other guys they've drafted, but
yeah,
again, they're not going to do what they should do. They're going to draft some random tackle or something.
Right. Jacoby Myers now goes to the Raiders. Yeah. So he's kind of bumping down a little bit on the target totem pole with Davante, a clear number 1. Yeah. Does he come anywhere close now to replicating his numbers from last year?
It's going to be tough, playing behind such a elite, target getter like Davante Adams. But the loss of Darren Waller should help. Again, they have Austin Hooper there. But also there's trade rumors around Hunter Renfrow. So if they do trade him away, that'll help. But it's going to be tough for him competing with Adams and potentially Renfrow to really hit the numbers he had last year. He was he was the clear target in that offense. Obviously, he has some limited touchdown upside. So I just view him as more of a volume dependent wide receiver 3-4 in this offense. Nothing to get excited about. But again, he has a pretty high floor in that range. So it kind of just depends how your draft is going if he's the type of receiver you want to target.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged 6.9 targets per game for the Patriots. Mac Hollins in that number 2 role last year, 5.5 targets. I think Myers is somewhere in between those two. Probably 5 to 6 targets a game. I would think for Myers behind Adams, especially with Jimmy G at quarterback. Now there's a little bit of upside if their defense is bad, obviously, or if Adams gets hurt. But he's going around wide receiver 48. I think that's fair. Just because we've never seen him really score touchdowns, he's not going to put up like a massive yard per catch average or anything like that. So yeah, it's tough to really get behind him as well. Elijah Moore goes from the Jets to Cleveland. Does he have any value here? I know he's probably still behind Cooper, Njoku, potentially even DPJ who broke out.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really someone we need to draft, but keep an eye on him. There's still no denying he has talent. I mean, he had a really good rookie season last year. He just completely flopped. Probably had to do with just the brutal QB situation. Garrett Wilson just being an absolute stud right away probably contributed that. So Moore might fade into the background for a couple of years and might pop up, kind of like a Zay Jones type of career arc. So I still like his upside, but he's going to be the 4th target on the Browns to start the season. So it's really hard to invest right away, but it wouldn't surprise me if farther down the line, if there's injuries or something, he pops up. But heading in the season, no, I'm not buying in.
Yeah, it's and there's just been enough red flags with him. Another guy who
Yeah.
started out well and just kind of went downhill a little bit like Juju. Alan Lazard, he's going around wide receiver 56 now. Kind of mentioned him before. Any other thoughts? Is there any value at that price? I just I just worry about the target share, and especially because I know he's a great blocker. Like he'll be on the field, but
Yeah.
he could be behind Corey Davis even, and for targets. So how are you looking at?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not buying in on him. Last year, I loved him. He had a career year last year without Devontae. He's not really a number one wide receiver, so I'm not too worried about him, becoming a number two option behind Garrett Wilson. So I think sticking with Aaron Rodgers potentially, if this actually goes through, certainly helps. But again, he's going to be more of the number two, potentially number three option. So it's definitely a downgrade. What's his ADP right now? Like
56.
50.
So it's pretty cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's hard to get excited about him, but he's not a bad by that price. There's probably guys in that range, maybe with more upside, but yeah, he's going to have Rodgers. Who knows? He's Rodgers' boy. Maybe he just targets him early just because they have chemistry. So he might be buying in at that price, but it would be really tough to buy him if he gets like inside the top 50.
Yeah, and the defense should be good, so it could
Yeah,
be
yeah.
not a ton of volume. Odell Beckham finally has a team. He's on the Ravens, but we don't know what's going on with the Ravens
Oh God.
quarterback situation. So I mean, Beckham's ADP right now is wide receiver 50. I'm sure that's gonna go up. Because he should be the top receiver on the Ravens. Although Bateman is still there. Mark Andrews obviously will be the number one target. But I don't know. How do you value Beckham? I guess right now he's coming off an injury. We have no idea about the quarterback situation. We have a tight end that could, out target him, and then there's another guy who was there like de facto number one that's coming back.
Yeah, no, I this is really hard to project. I'm probably not buying into Beckham. Like you said, he's not going to be the number one target. That'll be Mark Andrews. I still like Rashad Bateman. So he has some stiff target competition on a team that might not throw that much, and we don't even know who their quarterback is going to be. So I'm off him. I think he should be pretty much 100% at this point. I mean, he didn't really play last year, so that should be good. But yeah, no, I want nothing to do with him in this offense. I think it was a terrible landing spot for him.
Yeah, it's I mean, if he stays around that outside the top 50, I mean, I don't mind taking a flyer because he could have that similar kind of situation with the Rams, where maybe he doesn't catch a ton of balls each game, but he always a threat for a touchdown. But yeah, that would depend on Lamar being there and a lot. So as of right now, don't love it too much, but got to keep an eye on at least.
Yeah.
He could emerge as at least their number one receiver if they're not their number one target. Adam Thielen, he goes to Carolina. Is he just washed at this point? Like, was this, is he gonna put up DJ Moore type target numbers? I mean, he's going wide receiver 61, so people aren't believing in him as of now, but it seems like they signed him to be the number one receiver.
Yeah, I think at wide receiver 61, he's enticing. I wouldn't say he's washed. I mean, is he in the decline phase of his career? Has he lost some speed? Absolutely. But if you watch some of his film last year, he's still great. He's still a good route runner and he gets open. But a lot of the time he would be open and Cousins would just target Justin Jefferson instead. And could you blame him? I mean, Justin Jefferson's arguably the best receiver in the game. So I think just now that he goes to a Panthers team where he sits atop just a completely inexperienced wide receiver depth chart, I think he could dominate targets. And I'm assuming, the Panthers they're going to be drafting Bryce Young. So he could be a good, security blanket for a rookie like Bryce Young. So I think he could dominate targets. So I have him as, low end wide receiver 4 or 5. But he has a higher floor than most of these guys in this wide receiver 60 range. So I do think he is offering value there, is probably the number one target in this offense.
Yeah, it's at that price, I think you might as well take a flyer on him. But yeah, I do think he's kind of past that point where he's he's going to go back to what he used to be, and this could, the floor is still massively low, which I guess is factored in. But
yeah, I wouldn't say he's like going to put up DJ Moore numbers or
yeah.
Adam Thielen 2020 numbers or something like that. So I wouldn't say he's washed, but the next guy we might say,
Allen Robinson, he goes to Pittsburgh. I guess the biggest thing does he impact Pickens or Deontay in any way? I wouldn't think so, just based on the fact that this guy couldn't really get open last year.
Yeah, no, I'm not too worried about Deontay Johnson or George Pickens with Allen Robinson in town. I'm off on Allen Robinson. If he couldn't hit last year he had a clear path to be the number 2 target on the Rams, and he completely flopped. So going to Pittsburgh, where they already have Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, even Pat Freiermuth, he's going to be the number 4 target in this offense at best. So I'm completely off, and maybe you can take him in the later rounds in best ball or something, but I'm not worried about anybody else's value with them, landing Allen Robinson. I think he is definitely in the washed category.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we want anything to do with him. Let's close it up with some tight ends. Darren Waller is the big one. Goes to the Giants from the Raiders. What do you think? He's going at tight end 7 right now. Can he get back to kind of putting up that value? I know he's been kind of banged up these last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's about right for him. His value is probably the same. This offense is going to have a lower volume to go around, but he could be the clear number 1 target, just given their lack of weapons right now. And they have like 8 slot receivers. Have you seen their depth chart? They have like 8 slot. What the hell? But he's obviously their best pass catcher. They're also in the market to draft a really good potential like slot receiver with their first pick. So that could be a slight hit to Waller. But as of right now, I think Waller has a clear path to volume in this offense. But, the last couple seasons, he's not staying healthy. So, he played 8 games last year, 11 games the year before. We have to remember that Waller was a late bloomer. He's on the wrong side of 30. So, durability is still an issue with him. So he has top 5 upside, but, you just can't trust him to stay healthy. So I think tight end 7 sounds about right right now.
Yeah, if you can kind of get him, outside the 7th round or something like that, or outside the 6th, like top 6 rounds, it's more of the risk doesn't hurt you as much. I think it's worth taking a shot at him getting back, to that top tier of tight ends, because it's a hard position to compete if you don't get a Travis Kelce or somebody like that. And Dalton Schultz, he's the other tight end of note who made a move. He goes to the Texans. He could be the number 1 target on the Texans at this point. I mean, Nico Collins is still there, but Brandon Cooks is not. Schultz is actually going tight end 10. He's going right around, just around the pick number 100 overall. What do you think of him?
He is tricky because, like you said, he could be the number 1 target. Although, they got Robert Woods, so he has some competition now. It's definitely going to be a QB downgrade. And, when it comes to Schultz, I never considered him an elite tight end. He certainly was a good fit for the Cowboys offense. He was one of Dak's favorite targets. So this could be a situation, I don't know, like an Austin Hooper when he went from the Falcons to the Browns, and I was completely off him. And now, Hooper's bouncing around the Titans and Raiders, and we couldn't care less about him. I don't think Schultz is that bad necessarily, but I think, tight end 10 is a bit too pricey for him. Like a guy like, TJ Hawkinson, I think he's an elite tight end. So when he went to the Vikings, I still think he's going to dominate. But Schultz, I think there is just a question mark how he's going to blend in with this team. And, being the number 1 target, he's going to get more attention from the defense. I just don't think he has the athleticism to really overcome that much. So I think tight end 10 is way too high for him. I rather take guys like Greg Dulcich, Chigga Kwanku, Tyler Higbee, Tyler McBride, Zach Ertz, than Schultz right now.
Yeah, Schultz could, he was about 3.8 catches for 39 yards last year. If he even gets to that in the Texans, I think that would be good. And he's never been like a massive touchdown guy either. Yeah. And I don't know if this offense is going to be anywhere near the Cow. I mean, I do know it's not going to be anywhere near the Cowboys in efficiency, right, but even in volume, I don't think it probably gets there. So yeah, Schultz, I think even with that enticing, top target potential here, Robert Woods, another guy, probably doesn't do much here, but I don't think you want to invest in like a Texans pass catcher with questionable range of outcomes in the top 100 picks. All right, that is going to wrap it up for our Fantasy Flex pre-draft 2023 podcast. Be sure to check us out after the draft. We'll drop another episode breaking everything down. You can find Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon. You can find us at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.